Well, today's video is going to be a little bit something special. We do have a named storm coming into the Lakewood Ranch area, into the Gulf Coast, and so I thought it would be very appropriate for us to bring in a couple of insurance specialists that we have that work in conjunction with Michael Saunders and Company. This is Mark Boehmig with Michael Saunders and Company, and in this channel, Living in Lakewood Ranch, we cover all the areas around Lakewood Ranch, from Bradenton to Sarasota and Siesta Key up to Anna Maria Island. So today, I'm very honored to have a couple of guests with me. We have Monica.montiel and we have Laura Noderer, and Laura and Monica are both with Baldwin Group here in the St. Pete area, and they're our affiliates for taking care of insurance for our clients. So, and I'm sure you probably know that under the Michael Saunders umbrella, we have a title company, a mortgage company, and Baldwin Group is our insurance company. So because we actually have a named storm, I thought it would be very appropriate for us to bring in these ladies and have them tell us a little bit about the insurance company, what's going on in the marketplace. So first, I'm going to start with Laura, and if you don't mind just introducing yourself and tell us a little bit about your background.
Thanks, Mark. Yes, my name's Laura Noderer, and I've been with the Baldwin Group here for about 9 years. And I've worked in our private risk area, meaning I help successful business owners and individuals with their personal insurance needs. So I've worked in this industry, for quite a while. Know the coastal areas because it's always been in Florida, but I can also have capacity for any properties that clients have outside of Florida. So I handle everything on the property casualty side of Baldwin Group.
Oh, that's perfect. And then Monica, if you don't mind, give us an idea of your background and what it is you specialize there at Baldwin Group.
Of course. Hi, everyone. My name's Monica.montiel. I have been in the insurance industry now for about 11 years, but I've been with the Baldwin Group for 3 years. I am the business development manager, so I work closely with our friends over at the Michael Saunders Group and, just help with that insurance process when someone's purchasing a home. I link them up with one of our experts and help them get that insurance in place.
Well, that's perfect. I really appreciate you all being here today. And it's really funny because, as you know, this is what's in the news here for our area on Florida's Gulf Coast. And what I'm probably going to do, if you don't mind, Laura, I'm going to bring up a couple of things on the screen, but maybe you can talk to us. I know that insurance has gotten to be a problem in Florida, and I say a problem because when we bought our house here, we're in Lakewood Ranch, and we bought it in 2020, and I think our first year it was $1,600. The next year it was $1,900, and it went to $2,600, and it went to $3,400. So I've seen it myself increase gradually. So hopefully I wanted to try and get some good information on what's going on here. What are the current trends affecting the insurance industry, and where it is that you see going, and what happens when we see this kind of a picture when we look at our local news.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Mark. And your story is very common to many of our other clients and policyholders here, especially in the state of Florida. A couple of the things that are causing the increase in the cost are that we've had the worst catastrophic events in the past 10 years here ever in history. And that's not just hurricanes, a ton of flooding that came in through storm surges with those hurricanes, and then also a lot of wildfires, earthquakes out west. Obviously, we saw poor Hawaii get hit really bad last year there by that wildfire. And so all of those things from a catastrophic loss have added up quickly on the claims payouts. And so that's increased the cost and passed on to the policyholders. Another thing that we're seeing is social inflation and some nuclear verdicts. So with the cost increasing for labor and supply and unemployment being on the rise, it's harder and it takes longer to get houses rebuilt. So that's going to increase cost per square foot of the house versus 5-10 years ago. Also with the assignment of benefits, we were having a lot of issues with that, especially in South Florida, where people were signing over their policies to these fraudulent vendors. They've done some tort reform, so that's hopeful to catch up and help us recoup some of those losses. But they were being abused basically with the policies to fix things that should have just been normal maintenance on the house and not an actual loss that would be covered. And then nuclear verdicts would be related to anything on the liability side of your policy. So when you have a homeowner's policy, a renter's, a condo's policy, there's a liability section of coverage that you have in that policy. And so that's for any damages you cause to another person, a third party. And so those lawsuits have increased dramatically. You know, if there are drowning events, if they were situations where that person was held liable because someone slipped and fall, they left and drove drunk, you know, any type of situation like that, we've seen those go on the rise a lot more than, you know, they used to. So that's been passed on to policyholders. And then we have a couple other ones I know Monica will go over too as well.
Well, let me go back one step before when you were talking about claims. And I think maybe most of that came from fraudulent roof repairs. Is that correct?
Yes,
where a
very
roofing
true.
company might come out and say, hey, we think you have damage to your roof. We can get that taken care of for you. Sign this right here. And then all of a sudden, the owners didn't realize they were signing away their rights. And then the roofing companies would sue the insurance companies to get them put on. Is that basically how that went?
Absolutely. That's correct, Mark. Yeah. What they would do is they basically signed over the rights to their policy. And so the roofer could take the claim that maybe cost $20,000 for a roof, and they could increase that up to $50,000 for the roof because they add on any incidental charges they want to do themselves. So that they have put a stop to that in Florida. There's actually clauses mostly in policies now that exclude assignment of benefits. So you're not able to do that. But unfortunately, a lot of clients were taken advantage of, and, you know, and they're in very detrimental situations where they had, you know, water pouring in from a hurricane, roof claim, and those vendors were right there to pick up the pieces. And unfortunately, the clients didn't read the contracts. So that's on the, you know, mend there per se.
Right.
But yeah, that did cause a lot of the cost increase.
All right. And then, Monica, if you could, can you address some of the concerns of fraud and what that's doing here?
Yeah, so like both of you mentioned, one of the biggest contributors to what we've seen in the recent insurance market is that of those roofing scams, that roof fraud. So like you mentioned, roofing contractors are going door to door, asking these homeowners to inspect their roofs for storm damage, and then getting these homeowners to sign away their rights. So by the time that the contractors are putting in a claim, the insurance carriers are disputing these claims, and then here come the litigation costs. And by the time that this is finally settled, it is being settled at a much higher cost than what that original claim amount is. And just to put it into perspective, Florida has about an 8% of the homeowners insurance claims in the United States. It's pretty on par with the rest of the country, yet 76% of all the lawsuits were coming from Florida in the entire state. Now we have started seeing some changes with that after the legislative changes that were made, and we're starting to see the market actually strengthening because of these changes that have been made. We're not seeing that fraud come around as often as it was in the past couple of years.
So also, if I'm not mistaken, we have insurers that are now coming back to the state that had previously left because of the litigious part of being in Florida. There was a lot of lawsuits. So the insurance companies were just saying, well, we just are not going to do business there. So then what happens is you're spreading the opportunity out to fewer people who are actually writing policies. But are we increasing the number of insurance companies that are coming back?
Yes. So within the last year, we've had 9 new carriers who have been approved to start writing insurance in Florida. So we're slowly starting to see the market trend in the right direction. Instead of having carriers, you know, pulling out or canceling policies in Florida, we're starting to see carriers wanting to write insurance in Florida again. Good. And in the last year, we've had 9 new carriers who have been approved to start writing insurance. Well,
that's really going to help in the long run to try and reduce the cost. Now, that's part of the next question is, I don't know if most of the viewers are familiar, because before I got into being in real estate, I really didn't realize that there was something called reinsurance. And then, so maybe if you could tap on that just a little bit, and then what the future rate outlook looks like.
Yeah. So when you think about reinsurance, it's basically insurance for the insurance company. So should there be, you know, a catastrophic loss and the insurance company has significant losses for its policyholders, the reinsurance they're able to mitigate some of those losses to that reinsurance company. So what we were seeing with everything that was happening in the Florida market, these reinsurance rates were getting higher and higher and higher But this year, for the first time in years, we've actually been seeing those reinsurance rates trending down. So when you see those rates trending down, that's all going to trickle down to the consumer level as well.
That's really good. That's really good. So now I want to try and switch up a little bit and go to some of the mitigation strategies. You know, what is it that buyers and current homeowners might be able to do to reduce their risks and, you know, that type of thing so that they can get the best rate possible? And Monica, I think as long as you're on the screen there, maybe you can tell us about that.
Yeah, definitely. One of the biggest things you're going to want to do, whether you're purchasing a home or it's your existing home, maybe you have an older home and have put on a new roof. One of the things we always suggest for our clients to do is get a wind mitigation inspection. So if anyone who's watching is not familiar with the wind mitigation inspection, basically what they're going to be checking for, it's going to let the home insurance company know how well your home is going to withstand against strong winds. And these inspections can possibly save you anywhere from a couple hundred to a couple thousands of dollars a year. So they're going to be looking at if your roof has a secondary water resistant layer. They're going to look at the shape of your roof, whether your doors, garage doors, are they stormproof? Are your windows impact resistant? So there's a couple different features on your home that they're going to be looking at. And then based on those features, you're going to be able to get a discount on your homeowner's insurance policy. And that discount is actually good for up to 5 years.
Okay. And so that, I guess, really comes up to the updates that you've done in your home. How much does age have to do with it? Because I've sold a lot of houses out on Anna Maria in the Holmes Beach area, and these were built in like 1957, 1960. So I'm sure that the age of the house has a lot to do with insurability too, and rate prices. Is that correct?
So I would say not as much the age of the home, but the age of the features of the home. A big thing they're looking at right now is roof ages. So you want to make sure you're not letting your roof get too old. Ideally, a lot of our carriers are looking for roofs, like let's say a shingle roof, anywhere from maybe 10 to 15 years old. It varies by carrier, so give or take a few years. But for a shingle roof, they're typically looking for like 10 to 15-year-old roof, tile roof, maybe 15 to 25. It can vary, but that's one of the biggest things that insurance carriers are looking at right now. Another big one that they're looking at is water heaters. So if you have a water heater that's older than 15 years old, you're probably going to want to replace that. There's a lot of carriers who will not take a water heater that's older than 15 years old. And then, of course, just the maintenance of the home. You want to make sure your plumbing, your electrical boxes, your wiring, that everything is working properly, everything is up to date. And if anything needs to be fixed, you want to go ahead and fix that. And that's going to help you get the best rates that you can with insurance.
All right, that's good. Laura, can you give us a little bit of information on elevation? I know here in Florida we have zones, X, AE, VE, those kind of things. And so I know that a lot of the insurance carriers are looking at what zone the house is in. Can you talk about how that relates to elevation and where that comes into a factor, and maybe how we should stop saying no more flood zones in Florida, because everything is a flood zone in Florida. So.
Yes, thank you, Mark. I would say this is our second one, at least I know myself, that I preach on outside liability liability protection is the flood protection, right? So typically a lot of the times we'll rely on, if the lender states that it's in a hazardous flood zone, meaning that it's in an A or a V type flood zone, V as in Victor, but they neglect any ones that are not falling in that zone category as far as what they require for insurance. And then they typically only require what FEMA allows, which is the maximum of $250,000 of coverage for the building. $100,000 of contents coverage there too is optional for the client to add. But it definitely, for the clients that we have on average purchasing homes, that's not enough to cover the home if it does have the total loss from flood damages. And just like we saw Helene approaching us and some of the prior storms, a lot of the damage that they do bring is the flood damage from the rising waters, especially on our west coast here of Florida. It's really important because we have much shallower waters, and the storm surges are much higher than we're going to see on the east coast of Florida. And yes, everybody is in a flood zone. They actually used to call the X, B as in boy, C as in Charlie zones. They were called preferred zones and low hazard zones. They're actually not anymore. There's all flood zones. It's just they're a little less hazardous than A zones and B zones. For example, my house, I'm on a A zone right down the street, not that far. The other person across the street is in an X zone, so they don't purchase flood coverage. They still should, but they don't. So FEMA's a little outdated. They've started to remap some things through what they call their FEMA 2.0 that they did a couple years back. And so what happened then is they got back with actual databases to make sure they're properly charging for storm surge, the location of the home, the age of the home, the cost of the home to rebuild, the type of construction. So there's more added data that they're using to actually get these secure costs. But some important things to look for is the elevation of how your house sits in relation to what they called the BFE, base flood elevation, that's required to be built to be to FEMA code. So you want to always be at least at that amount or higher, a positive elevation there of how they're going to rate your house. So typically they take the top of the bottom floor, be it if that's where a garage entry is, or if it's at the first start of the living floor if the house is built up. But those are really important things to do. We can look at an elevation certificate, is what's called, that you would get through an engineer. And we could look at that to see and detect if that is, in compliance. FEMA did do a lot of rate changes with those base flood elevations and raise them. So that's something just to be cognizant of. But there is an interesting, almost like loophole to it that FEMA allows, and it's called a flood assumption. And so what you can do is if the sellers have a flood policy that's through FEMA, it has to be through FEMA, that's already in place, we can actually take that data and we can take the new buyer's data, and then we can start a new policy referencing that they're going to continue coverage. So I have a client, for example, they're in St. Petersburg. Their house is well over $6 million in value. Their premium is about $1,200, I would say, on their policy. If they were to ever let that lapse for the exact same amount of coverage that they have, it would go to about $12,000 to $13,000. So it's really important to have that conversation.
So if I understand what you're saying is that flood policies can be transferred, but you have to have certain parameters to do that. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Correct.
Yes. It just needs to be a FEMA policy that the sellers have in place on the house, and we need to continue that with the buyers.
Okay. And can you address just a little bit, if somebody is, let's just say they're in an X zone versus an AE zone, an X zone means that for mortgage purposes and that kind of thing, you don't have to have a flood policy. But if you don't have to have a flood policy, then they're much less expensive than if you're in an AE zone. Is that fair to say?
Correct. Yes. And what's really neat is that we have a lot of private insurers that actually will give much broader coverage. So we compare the two. I know within our firm, both Monica and I, we will look at the FEMA rate and then we'll also compare it to the private rates. But the really important thing is any rising water that comes into the house from an outside event, that is considered flood damage, and it's not covered by your homeowner's policy. So if you decide to forego the flood coverage because you are, like you said, Mark, in an X zone, if the client is, then you have no flood coverage at all. So I know with Helene coming, that's our biggest concern right now up the coast, that we're going to get a lot of flood damage as we saw with the last storm. So
right.
And there's typically a 10-day wait on private flood to start from when we take payment and get the application signed for a private insurer. With FEMA, it's 30 days. So it's really important to make sure that we place those policies as quickly as possible. And they've already pretty much put up all of our binding restrictions that we cannot place coverage because of the impending storm right now. But just something to keep food for thought there.
Right. So right now, it is almost a little after 4 o'clock on the 24th. So if somebody was to call you and they have a home and they needed to get it bound, you can't do it right now. Is that correct?
Unfortunately not. Yeah, I mean, it's actually, we kind of find it humorous, like when Monica and I see these notes, but they'll say, hey, at 3:59 we stopped binding coverage and it's like 4:02. So it's way past when they even notify us that we can even bind the coverage. Anytime you see a storm coming and there's any of those spaghetti miles that look like they're going to touch Florida in any way, get things settled there on the insurance side of things, because those restrictions are about to come through. So
Got it. Okay. Well, I know it's a really tricky time for a lot of people, and everybody's glued to the TV and they watch people go to the grocery stores and buying the water and all that kind of thing. But really, when it gets down to it, it's what kind of coverage do you have should you need it? And in the last storm that came through here, it wasn't so much that it was a Cat 1 or Cat 2 storm. It's that we had 16 inches of rain in a very short amount of time. And people don't realize that at least in our area of Florida, the groundwater level is very shallow. So you could basically take a shovel and dig down 5 or 6 feet and you could find water. So when all that rain comes down and the ground gets saturated and comes to the top, it's not like it has anywhere to go because we're pretty flat. So it's really because our groundwater here is not very deep. And it's closer to the surface, so it just doesn't have anywhere for 16 inches of rain to go when it comes that quick. Monica, can you give us an idea of what it is that people would expect coming to Baldwin Group and why we might be a little different than some of the other insurance carriers and what they would provide to a client that maybe that I've got them under contract to buy a house and they're going to need a policy, or they just happen to be somebody that's watching this video that lives here on the Florida Gulf Coast and they want to get a quote from an insurance carrier?
Of course. At the Baldwin Group, we know insurance, especially Florida insurance, it can be difficult and can be intimidating. And, it may be a stressful part of purchasing a home, but that's what we're here for. We're here to take that stress away from you and basically do the whole insurance shopping for you. So we have a team of agents that we work with. We will partner you with one of these agents and they're going to do all the shopping for you. And they're going to find a policy that's best going to fit your specific needs. We understand not everyone has the same needs. Everyone's going to need different coverage levels. Everyone has different budget levels, but we can work with you and modify a policy and find you the best policy to fit your specific needs. Okay. We also have access to the majority of the carriers, about 90% of the carriers that are writing insurance in Florida at the moment. So our agents are going to shop you around. They're going to try to find you the best rates and the best coverages, and they're doing all that work for you.
Perfect. So when I made this introduction at the beginning, I told people that we have a title company, a mortgage company, and then an insurance company. So can you talk about a little bit about your relationship with Michael Saunders and Company?
Of course. So we have an exclusive partnership with Michael Saunders and Company. What we do is we work with Mark, we work with all the other agents at the office. When you're working with a client and they're needing homeowners insurance, we're here to provide you with that. We actually have a website set up where you can make requesting a quote in a matter of, minutes. You would go on this website, just put in, some basic information that's going to come to us. And then our agents are going to hit the ground running and start shopping you around for insurance and taking care of the whole process. Once we shopped it around, we are reaching out to you and we'll be providing you with the quote. And then at that point, we can discuss if there's any modifications, anything else that you need, and get it tailored to fit your needs.
Good. So I will put a link down in the description below. That'll be a direct email link where if you want to fill out a form and you can send it directly to Baldwin Group and we can take care of that, or also maybe the link to actually do a quote. Okay, so we're going to come to the close, but I wanted Laura to talk just a little bit about the insurer partnership and a couple other things, and then we'll draw this to a conclusion.
Thank you, Mark. Yeah, so what is wonderful within the Baldwin Group, we have 2 areas that we specialize in. Monica's team is phenomenal, especially in our Florida market. If you're, just buying that new home, first-time home buyers, anybody that just wants to maybe shop the home only. But within my area too, I have in our private risk area, we have additional partnerships with exclusive insurers throughout the entire U.S. So that's going to be like your Chubbs, Pures, AIGs, Berkeley Ones, Vault, and then we also have Cincinnati Insurance Company. So those may be some large names you've heard about, especially Chubb. They're one of our largest insurers, but we have dedicated underwriters directly with those companies that we have preferred status with. And so we can get a little more pull when it comes to approving things. They do work on things in a full account basis, meaning we look at all the homes the client has, any other toys, recreational vehicles, boats. We have a whole yacht division. We have a whole aviation area too within our firm. And then obviously the important piece with the liability protection there too. But we have a business section for commercial risk and employee benefits, long-term care, life insurance, disability, all of that. And so within my group, I work on that from the client's full holistic approach, which we call that branded to us specifically. And that just means basically instead of siloing out what they have, we look at it from a comprehensive perspective to make sure if there's any intersections of risk, those are properly protected. There's not gaps in coverage and there's not overlaps in coverage, right? And so we go through a really deep, in-depth analysis that we present to the clients. But it's great to start too on our website. That way Monica and I can work directly together to determine what the best needs are and who's going to have the best markets for the clients. So just keeping that in mind, sometimes you get limited when it's a local broker and they don't have that breadth of access. So because we're licensed in all 50 states and we are traded nationally on the NASDAQ there as a publicly traded company, we do have more pull than the average broker, but still that small boutique feel because we did start here in Tampa Bay. So.
Well, that's pretty good. That's good information to know, because I know that a lot of people here are second and third homeowners. We have a lot of properties here that, you know, this might not be their primary residence. They have homes in other states, and then they would be looking for someone so that they're not having a bunch of different policies. They can have it all under one roof. So I hope you found this video helpful for insurance, and I really appreciate Laura and Monica spending some time here to go over a few things. And like I said previously, I will put a link down in the description below so that if you want to get more information, or if you want to contact them directly to talk about your insurance needs, you'll have the ability to do that. And if you find yourself coming here to the Lakewood Ranch area and you're looking for a home, I'd be more than honored to help you try and find a property that suits your needs. Or if you currently live here in the Lakewood Ranch, Sarasota, Manatee County area, and you're considering selling your home, I'd be more than happy to talk to you as well. Mark Boehmig, Michael Saunders and Company.